Hello and welcome to Cupcake Addiction's Aeroplane Cupcake tutorial, where I'll be showing you how to make this really cute and relatively simple aeroplane cupcake. Some of you guys saw this in my Draw My Life video. I was illustrating in cupcakes a bit of a story of my life, and you asked me to show you how I made this cupcake, so here's the tutorial just for you guys. Tools and equipment that we will be using today: I've got some wax paper, a couple of pieces of wax paper, I've got some sticky tape, a spoon, I've got my cupcake, and I just baked mine in a blue cupcake liner today. I've got some red frosting, whatever colour you want your aeroplane to be. I did orange for my first plane because the company I used to work for was orange and its opposition is red. So I thought, you know what, let's make the two competing airlines. I've got some natural ice cream wafers. So these are generally found for us here in Australia in with all of the ice cream cones and puddings. If you can't find these, what you're going to need is a relatively thin cookie that you're able to slice. So I hear that graham crackers can work quite well for this. I've got a pair of scissors. I've got some grey candy melts or melted chocolate. Now I've used mostly white chocolate melted with just a couple of black candy melts in it, or a couple of drops of black food colour paste, only paste, not liquid, just to give us a bit of a grey effect. I've got a Ziploc bag. I've got my little aeroplane cloud printable cupcake wrappers. I will leave a link to that in the description box below so that you guys can download, print and use those at home. I've got a couple of knives, just regular butter knives, and I've got a sharp knife. Now I've pre-made some of the decorations today, but I will be showing you how to make them. And I've also made for you guys just a little bit of a template. So this is just to help make life a little bit easier. And look, I'm not an artist by any stretch of the imagination, but I've just drawn out some of the basic shapes that you'll need for your aeroplane cupcakes. So let's get started. Now the first thing that you want to do is we're going to prepare our little wings and our little windows and such. So you want to take your two ice cream wafers. The first thing that you want to cut out is going to be your wings. So for the wings, you can see on my little template here, I've just drawn sort of a rough guide as to what your shape should be. So it's up to you if you want to take your template and actually cut on it like that, or if you just want to go by eye here. Showing you how you'd cut on the template, you're literally just going to line up about there, and you're going to come up to the other line on the template, and you're just going to cut down. Beautiful. So that's why I love those ice cream wafers. They just cut really nicely. Now, you could use technically both sort of halves of that for your two different wings and just cut it smack bang in the middle. But because the ice cream wafers have got different sides on them, I'm going to get my second one and I'm just going to cut it out. There's your two wings. Now out of these other two pieces, we're just going to make our tail. So the tail here, really the tail part is this part here, and this little section here is going to go into the cupcake. So don't worry too much if it's not perfect, just try and get roughly that length happening. And then we're just going to cut this little top of the wing. And look, that's really easy, that's just cutting across. So you've got a nice tall triangle. Beautiful. There's our little pieces all cut and ready to go. All right, now for our windows, and we'll do this first so that they can get drying, I'm just going to take a little bit of that greaseproof paper or that wax paper, pop some of that chocolate into a Ziploc bag, use our scissors to cut. We're just fashioning this into a little bit of a piping tip. So just cutting off a little tiny tip. Do make sure that you know where that tip goes. You don't want to drop it into your work. We're just going to trace around that front window shape and then just fill it in. And then I'm going to squirt a little bit in here, and then I'm just going to use the end of the bag, not even squeezing now, just to distribute that chocolate around in that little outline that we've created. All right, now you can slide that whole thing over, and then for our little side windows, they're just these little blobs, so literally just little blobs of chocolate. Now the reason that I do this part first with the piping bag is because you are going to risk getting some crumbs in your deep chocolate container, so you don't want to get any crumbs in there before you put the chocolate into your piping bag and try to do this fine work, or you're going to end up with blockages. So that there can go off into the fridge to set, and that's not going to take too long at all. And now we'll get rid of our template. We don't need that anymore. All right, so now to dip your little wings, or to coat your wings, take that spoon out for now. To coat your wings, what you're going to do, take the longest pieces first, and you're not going to worry too much about this section here, because that section at the end of the day is going to be in the frosting. So I'm going to dip mine down, as I mentioned, a nice deep container, and then I'm just going to use the knife just to kind of drag some of that chocolate up the wing. Make sure that you fill in the backs of it nicely, and leave the top half blank just so that you've got something to grab it with and you're not going to make a huge mess. All right, now lifting it out, you want to take your knife and just scrape down the side. Definitely do a bit of a scrape of this chocolate because you don't want those wings to be too heavy or they're not going to hold in the top of that cupcake. So make sure that you do scrape down a bit, scrape up there, and then I'm just going to take the back of my knife and just lightly scrape. I'm not digging in, I'm just lightly scraping down, and that's just going to give us a nice little coating of the grey. On the back you don't need to be as neat, but once again do take off any excess there. So there's one wing. That can go off over here onto our piece of greaseproof paper or wax paper, and we'll complete that with the second wing. You'll notice when I'm doing this, I'm actually using the flat back of my knife, not the curved front, and that's just so that we don't dig into that chocolate, so that we just scrape it off nice and evenly across the wing. Now it's time to do our tail. So once again, this smaller or thinner end is going to be the one that goes into the cupcake, and this fatter end is going to be the one that comes out. So make sure that you dip accordingly. Your little wing or your little tail. Now this piece here, you do want this to be completely coated, but we're going to give this a little bit more chocolate. So hold it at the fat bottom and dip in the pointed top. And don't worry if it's not completely coated yet, because we are going to give that another dip a little bit later on. So take it down as far as you can without messing up your fingers too much. And off to the side that one goes. Now, they can all go off into the fridge, or you can just leave them on the bench. They're going to take a couple of minutes. Now, as I mentioned, for the sake of speed for this tutorial, I've pre-refrigerated some of mine. So here are some that I prepared earlier, and they've dried nice and firm. I've also got over here my little window details all ready to go. So now what you want to do is we're going to take our cupcake and we're going to pop frosting onto it. All right, so with this, I'm just doing a bit of a mound of frosting. I'm just using the back of the knife just to scoop it on. You want this to be quite a nice high mound of frosting. The frosting that I'm using today is our perfectly pipeable buttercream frosting, and I'll leave a link to the recipe for that in the description box below. It's my favorite recipe, and I've been using it in my cupcake business for years. Now that you've got sort of a bit of a messy dough, we want to neaten it up. So I'm just going to push down, not over the sides of my cupcake liner, just down to meet up with the sides of the cupcake liner, and that's just going to neaten up our edge. And then using the back of my knife again, I'm just going to just smooth off that dome. Now, because the shape of an aeroplane is not round, it's kind of a little bit longer. Obviously it's a cupcake, so it's still going to be a bit roundy shaped, but I just took the whole knife and just kind of scoop across one side ever so slightly, and then scoop across the other. And that kind of just gives you a little bit more of like a football-y type shape than a round cupcake. Brilliant. All right, so now we can start looking at our different pieces of plain. Now you want to take your back wing, this little sort of naked bit that we've left at the bottom there, you're going to dip that all the way into your candy melts, and that's going to create the rest of the colorings for it, or the rest of the coating for it. Then you're going to take this back bit and you're just going to sit it on top. So you may have to support that, but just let that one completely dry. And as I mentioned, once again, it's going to take a little bit longer because it is a warm surface and a warm surface. So while we're waiting for that one to dry, we can attend to the rest of our aeroplane. So you want to take your little windows, all of those, and your wings. We'll start with the windows today. Now I turn my windows over, so you've got the side that's been against the greaseproof paper, and that's just going to be a little bit neater. So at the front of my plane here, I'm just going to place down one window, leave a little gap in the middle, place down the second window. Beautiful. Now before we go adding the wings and other bits and pieces, we'll take our cupcake wrapper. With the cupcake wrapper, they're all going to be a little bit different. Your cupcakes are all going to be slightly different sizes. So it's a bit of a one size fits all, but you just want to just wrap it around the base of your cupcake and try to get it to come up nice and flush. So ideally what you want is a really nice tight fit and just that cupcake liner coming ever so slightly out the top of the cupcake patty pan, or the new cupcake liner that I've made, and we'll just sticky tape it at the back. So now you want to take your wings. Now with the wings, we're just going to pop them in. Flat side is going to come to the back, and I'm going to put them in quite a ways into that frosting. So if you've got cupcake coming up quite domey underneath, then you want to just push into the cupcake And at this point, you can decide whether or not you're happy with the length. So I actually think they're just a touch long. I'm just going to pull that wing out and we're just going to chop off just a tiny bit of the end. Once again, like I said, this is going to depend on the size of the cake that you've used, the amount of frosting, and push that back in. So whatever you do with your wings, make sure obviously that they're even. So we'll take another centimetre off the end of this one and push it into that side of the frosting. Now, your little windows on either side, it's as easy as just taking those little tiny blobs and just sticking them on. So here's business class. So when you're putting on your little windows, you just want to make sure that they're sort of in line with the edge of your, I guess, your front window or your front windscreen. And we're just going to put 4 or 5 across. Beautiful. So our little plane is almost complete. So I'm happy that the back of my plane has completely set. Now once again, just go a little bit by feel here. And we'll just cut just a little bit more of that off. Always make these pieces a little bit bigger because you can always make them smaller, but if you make them too small to begin with, you can't make them any bigger. So we're just going to slide that into the frosting. Now I do recommend that you use a nice firm frosting, such as our buttercream frosting for this, and that's just so that you do have enough stick and enough hold to hold all of these pieces of your plane. So once you've got all of your little bits and pieces into your cupcake, just turn him around. I'm just going to turn him around to face me. And make sure that you're happy with that front windscreen positioning. You can move this front windscreen around. I'm just going to push mine down a little bit and in a little bit just so that it's nice and centered there and in proportion. So there you've got your really cute aeroplane cupcakes. Perfect for kids' parties, baby showers, little pilots in training or big pilots already trained. I hope that you guys loved watching this tutorial. As always, thanks for tuning in to My Cupcake Addiction.